And later tonight, more on the Pfizer and Raisin Bran partnership that plans to bring the COVID vaccine to your dining table. But first, an exclusive FL 4490 interview with the managing editor of Global Atlanta, Trevor Williams, here to talk with us today about Japanese businesses in Georgia. Glad to have you on here, Trevor. Okay, I don't know who that is. Hey, can we try channel 3 real quick? Yeah. Hey, Trevor, how you doing? Good to have you on here.
Hey, how's it going? Sorry I'm late.
Don't worry, you're not live. So let's jump right into these questions. Starting off, how did Japanese businesses even get started here in Georgia?
Well, I mean, I think you can pretty much trace it back to YKK and Murata in the 70s, and it's just been a pretty steady trajectory from there. With the move of the automotive industry to the south, that's when we got this much bigger wave, and pretty much all of the foreign automakers are here.
I see. So why did these companies choose Georgia over any of the other states?
So it's cheaper, land was affordable, you had proactive governments, and all of that stuff is still the case. And so many of the Japanese companies that invested here 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago have continued to expand. And then more recently, we do have Japanese companies that are still setting up here, like new factories and such, but more recently it's been the expansions that have been driving more of the development. So you'll get a company that's had a factory here for 20 years, but they'll spend $900 million or something to build a new one next door. One of the big ones recently is Kubota, the tractor company. Mm-hmm. They've just had a huge expansion up in Gainesville.
Wow, I do love tractors. Now, is the rise of these companies in any way related to a sort of growth in the Japanese population in Georgia?
So yeah, the presence has steadily grown. It hasn't been this sharp spike, but since it started earlier, it's been kind of a more gradual line up and to the right. It's not necessarily that there's a lot of Japanese people here. I think there's maybe 10,000 in Georgia. It's not huge relative to other diasporas. They tend to go home. They tend to come for 3 to 5 years or something, set up the factory, get leadership localized, and then they go back and live in Japan, to the point where there's now a Georgia Club of Japan. I think I mentioned this. There's thousands of members of people who have been posted in Georgia as an expat and have gone back home. So,
hold on one second. Getting a message from FL 4490's very own Stephanie here with some live stats on the subject. So it looks like, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, there are currently 22,000 Japanese living in Georgia, which is a relatively low number compared to other states. Thank you very much, Stephanie. All right, so moving on, what kind of job opportunities do you think are available for people in Georgia who are looking to work with these Japanese companies?
Yeah, I would say it's gradually grown in terms of the corporate presence here, to the point now that you have 600 or so facilities. I don't think it's that many companies, but I think that, it depends on whom you ask about the numbers, but I think it's probably 300 to 400 companies, which is pretty big in one state. I think the Japanese companies, it's a bit different from most. I think the Koreans are kind of following this trajectory, but most of the Japanese investment here is in manufacturing, by far. It's almost all of it. And so most of it's manufacturing, most of it's in the automotive space. I mean, there's some deviation from that, but that's generally the trend.
We're talking a lot of things here, but can you maybe give us any raw numbers on these companies?
Yeah, I mean, the raw numbers, for sure, you can find certain sources of raw numbers. I mean, the stat that I keep, and I think Jetro is the one that has this, is, something like 30,000 employees are in Georgia are working for Japanese companies. So you can get some raw numbers on it for sure.
Oh, hold on one second. It seems we have Stephanie here again with some more important graphics. Stephanie? So we can see that while companies in Georgia are on the rise, the number of employees working at these companies tends to stay relatively the same over the years. Thank you, Stephanie. Now, for our next question, is there a difference between how Japanese companies and other foreign companies conduct themselves in Georgia?
We write about a company, and the consulate or the trade office here will have no clue that they're here. That rarely happens with the Japanese. I think partially because the size of the investments are always they're relatively large, and so they're very visible, and they have a very community focused orientation. So they always try to be very active in their communities. And so generally, the consulates and the trade offices know them very well, which is not always the case for other countries. Yeah, I mean, I think the other communities do very well, but I think in Asia particularly, you have kind of a more hierarchical structure, right? So you have fewer companies that are coming in without the government knowing about it, and they generally the government will be their first touch point when they come here.
All right, so for our final question, I know you've worked a lot with the consulate and other trade offices. How do these organizations impact Japanese businesses in Georgia and Georgia as a whole?
It's important for Atlanta to have these trade offices and consulates because the companies they look at where the other companies are going first of all, but then they also look at what does this infrastructure for our community look like? So having the consulate, having the Japan America Society, having all these community things like Japan Fest, I think that all kind of goes into the pot and helps make Georgia become a more attractive place.
Well, thank you so much for. Oh, hold on one second. Seems like Stephanie has one more graphic she'd like to share with us. Go ahead, Stephanie. Trevor, what are your thoughts on that?
Outdated. Sometimes don't have the full picture, but.
Well, unfortunately, we are out of time, but thank you so much, Trevor, for being a part of this interview. We really appreciate it, and we've all come to learn something about Japanese businesses and their role in Georgia. That wraps it up for this segment of FL 4490. I've been your host, Jason. Minasama, oyasuminasai.